World War II. It was the good war. The opposing factions, Allied and Axis, were defined by the men who led. Men who have become archetypes of good and evil. These men defined the conflict, rallied their countrymen, demanded loyalty, and hungered for victory. But if the leaders defined the war, it was the regular citizens who fought to defend their country, ordinary men and women who rose to extraordinary heights in the midst of battle. But the memories of World War II are rapidly fading, along with the men and women who lived and fought during this momentous period. Through their stories, we must preserve the valor and courage of the soldier, sailor, marine, and airman who fought this good war. For they are the heroes of World War II. June 5th, 1944 arrived. The preparations for the plan Eisenhower and his staff had worked on was now set into motion. The invasion plan and its goals were simple. Take the limited amount of landing craft available and land as many men and machines as possible to establish a beachhead. Then use the beachhead as a port to supply the push through Germany. The first element of this equation was 3 divisions of paratroopers, 2 American and 1 British, that were to jump before the actual landings. As the first hours of June 5th started ticking away, briefings for the paratroopers began.
So you were able to lay out the roads, lay out the positions, tell them each group what their responsibilities were for D-Day. So this was laid out on a sand table, and you'd take the men in there, you'd show them the situation, and each unit had an assigned job for D-Day.
After the briefing, it was on to the planes.
Beforehand, you had, each man had a parachute assigned to him, and each man was assigned exactly what to carry. So when it comes time to load up for the big jump, that's all been assembled. You go out, you put on your harness, you check each man out, and make sure that he has everything he should have. And then after you've taken care of each and every man, then you should get yourself ready.
While the first element of the equation continued their preparation, the second component readied for the invasion.
On the morning of June the 5th, we would find ourselves departing Plymouth, England, coming along the coastline of England, whereupon the convoy would make a decided right turn and head down for the Normandy beachhead. By the time we have traveled from Plymouth to Portsmouth, a mere 140 or so miles, 150 miles, we'll have accumulated about 5,000 plus ships of all sizes and all descriptions.
Aboard the ships of this vast armada were the men and machines that would partake in the landing. The third and final element of the plan was air support.
The day before D-Day, crew chiefs jumped up on the wings and said, "Lieutenant, we need your airplane right away. We got to paint it." And they used mops, rags, everything. Every Allied airplane had the invasion stripes on it. This was to identify all Allied aircraft over the beachheads. so that our Navy didn't shoot at us and our ground troops didn't shoot at us and so forth.
Our briefing on D-Day morning was at 1:30 in the morning, and we went to the briefing and were told it was a training mission, night training mission, and then we went to the final briefing room and they played the recording that Eisenhower had made telling us it was an invasion.
We didn't know anything until maybe the morning of D-Day that we were going to invade. We started out very early in the morning. We'd all get into a truck or a couple of trucks, and they would take us out to what we called the hard stand. That's where our B-17 was located. We'd climb in on the fuselage side, and everybody would just go to their particular stations. We would circle the air over England. Finally, when we were assembled, we would make our way towards the continent.
Primarily, our mission on D-Day was to set up a wall of airplanes. There were 1,000 of our fighters in the air, about 50 miles south of the beachheads, from treetop level to 30,000 feet. And no German pilot was foolish enough to try to get through that wall of airplanes. That would have been suicide, and none did.
As June 6th began, the planes carrying the paratroopers neared their targets. Many men thought of it as the $10,000 jump.
It had been estimated that we would lose 80% of the paratroopers on this jump. And the most insurance you could carry through the government was $10,000. So the $10,000 jump was it, baby. Your family might be getting $10,000 out of this jump.
The planes flew over the targets, dropping paratroopers, the first Allied forces to land in German-occupied Europe. Because of some last-minute changes in jump protocol, many men landed without their equipment and weapons because it came down separately in a leg bag.
Personally, I was able to slip and avoid a road and then managed to land in an orchard. So I came down very nicely, no problem at all. The first thing I did was decide I'm going after that leg bag. The only thing I found out there was a machine gun between me and that leg bag, and I said, the heck with it.
As the paratroopers tried to regroup inland from the beachhead, the Navy began the heavy bombardment of the beaches.
They would drop anchor at 2 o'clock in the morning, 12 miles offshore, ostensibly to be out of range of the feared German 88 shore batteries because their projectiles were sufficient enough to blow us plumb out to sea. At 2:30 a.m., we were lowered over the side in total darkness and would set about to pick up the troops alongside these troop transports. Now, these troops would board my watercraft. We traveled in what they call waves, 10 or 12 boats to a wave. Now, each hour for everyone was 6:30 a.m. And yet, you must understand that these troops are in this bouncing boat. The landing craft is only 36 feet in length, 10 feet wide, and it's like a cracker box. And this was an awesome experience for an 18-and-a-half-year-old kid. As I say, I was overwhelmed with the responsibility that lay right there in front of me in the person of these 36 young guys, just like me. We're all kids. I can recall vividly seeing the machine gun bullets hitting the water and ricocheting the water like 10 feet high. We left that ship that morning as kids, and several hours later, we returned to the ship to get another load of whatever as men.
The Higgins boats landed the ground troops. On Sword Beach, British and French troops cleared landing sites and eliminated German strong points with little resistance. At Gold Beach, most of the Allied units met light to moderate resistance. These British troops made a rapid advance inland. The Canadians landed on Juno Beach. It was fortified by the Atlantic Wall and filled with mines. Once ashore, they encountered strong German artillery fire. Utah Beach was one of 2 landing sites for the Americans. The first wave of troops landed in the wrong place. But this error ended up being a good thing because of its light German defenses. The U.S. troops were soon across the beach and moving inland where they met up with American paratroopers. The American troops landing on Omaha Beach were not as lucky as the other landing forces. German forces had built solid defenses that were manned by a well-trained division. As Allied landing forces tried to cross the 300 feet of beach, they were sitting ducks for the Nazi marksmen. By the end of the day, the Americans finally made it up to the bluffs and off the beach. But the price was high. 1 U.S. casualty paid for each yard of beachhead that was taken on Omaha Beach. 2,000 in all. The success of the Normandy invasion was due in part to the Germans buying the ruse of the fake landing in the Pas-de-Calais and the subsequent confusion that the actual landing at Normandy created. Credit must also be given to the planning by Eisenhower and his staff, but the landing could not have succeeded without the men who executed the plan, the men of the Navy, Coast Guard, Army, and Army Air Force. These men knew as they crossed the beachheads and moved inland that their job had just begun. By the end of D-Day, June 6, 1944, the Allies had landed 156,000 men on the beaches. But when those beaches were secured, the Allies met their next challenges inland and beyond. The paratroopers who had landed earlier moved forward with their mission.
Along the way from losing that leg bag on the jump, I was able to find a dead trooper. And so I took his rifle, his ammunition, what equipment I wanted. So I was armed at that time. The battalion consisted of about 80 men, roughly. Company E consisted of 12 men. Counting myself, there was a total of 13. And that was out of 149 men that jumped. They were so widely scattered, and one plane had been shot down and every man lost.
Though the troops were widely scattered, they assembled themselves as best they could and moved forward.
When we hit La Grande Chemin, which was located right at the head of Causeway Number 2, Causeway Number 2 turned out to be the main causeway for the troops coming in from Utah Beach on D-Day. And this battery was sitting right at the head of Causeway Number 2, ready to fire down any troops that were coming in from the beach. The battalion sent up a D company, and they tried to make a frontal attack. Of course, they're under strength. I think they had around 25 men. But they were driven back immediately. And so then I had the word from battalion, Winters, we want you to go up and take care of that. And they didn't know that I only had 12 men. When we hit close enough to the gun position, I brought everybody together and sent Lieutenant Compton with 2 men to crawl through that grass between us and the gun position. And when he got close enough to throw hand grenades, as they threw those hand grenades, they had 2 machine guns putting down basic fire. The rest of us got up and made a charge, so that as those hand grenades off, we were jumping into that first connecting trench. And the German troops who were there were started to withdraw. And we were able to cut them down immediately. But we can continue along that trench and take them on one at a time. And that's exactly what it ended up doing. We had come into contact that day. That had been my estimate of around 55 men that we were taking on. At this time, we didn't realize the significance of all this. It was only until a little later we realized that this gun was exactly at the head of Causeway number 2 and what we were doing. And the significance of this whole thing on the taking of Utah Beach and D-Day. An awful way to start off on D-Day, your first day in battle.
Taking out the German guns allowed the Allies to advance troops and equipment further into France. The effect of the many scattered but determined units like E Company was enormous. To the Germans, it seemed as though large Allied forces were attacking from all directions. To them, it appeared impossible to defend themselves or to mount an effective counterattack against the waves of infantrymen. Floating docks and airfields were erected, and troops and material began flowing in to begin the long push toward Germany. The Allies' ability to move supplies through these makeshift ports dictated how far and how fast the troops could move. And setbacks like the destruction brought on by Atlantic storms had a ripple effect that extended all the way to the soldiers on the front lines. The Nazis realized how vital these supply lines were to the Allied effort and clung tenaciously to the nearby port city of Cherbourg. If they could deny their enemy access to the port, they could stall their advance. By the time the United States 7th Corps wrested away control of the city, the intense fighting had left the port in ruins. It would be months before it would be operational again. GIs fought their way through France house to house, continually pushing the Germans back and rebuilding supply lines. 7 weeks after the D-Day invasion, they took the city of Saint-Lô. Finally, they had reached the line they had expected to hold 5 days after the invasion began. While the Allies regrouped, the Germans fell back to their inland defenses and dug in. They knew that if the Allies broke through their lines again, it would be an open country where there would be nothing to stop them from reaching Germany itself. For the first few days, cloud cover hampered Allied bombing, and the Germans held the line. But when the weather broke, the Allies made another push. 1,500 aircraft carpeted the German lines with 3,400 tons of bombs, crippling their defenses. Led by General Patton of the Third Army, U.S. tanks broke through the enemy lines and encircled what was left of the German defenses. The fleeing army was caught between two flanks of the Allied advance. In the ensuing battle, 10,000 German troops were killed and 100,000 more were captured. The total German losses since the Normandy invasion 2 months earlier reached 500,000. While the troops that landed in Normandy continued on, another Allied invasion hit the beaches in southern France. D-Day in southern France was originally intended as the second component of the D-Day landings in Normandy.
I think there were 3,000 vessels. I never saw so many vessels in my life of every description, where they were going to have the landing from southern France. This was, some weeks after the D-Day at Normandy. And our job was to soften up the gun emplacements on the shore.
For 3 months, Allied bombers had been pounding southern France. dropping more than 1,200 tons of bombs from over 5,000 aircraft. The landing force was led by the U.S. 7th Army, made up of veterans of the wars in Italy and North Africa. But the landing also marked an important homecoming for French troops.
You could see the small landing craft heading for shore when we stopped the dropping the bomb. And it was a lovely day and a lovely mission, since we only saw one burst of flak.
Pushing inland from the 15-mile wide beachhead between Toulon and Cannes, the Allies met with light resistance. But as they advanced north up the Rhone River Valley, the fighting grew more intense. But the Allied push could not be held by the defending Germans, and they retreated north to the defensive perimeter around Germany itself, the Siegfried Line. As thousands of troops fell back, American bombers pounded and strafed them all the way to the German border. After 10 days of fighting, the Allies advanced 100 miles inland and had captured 50,000 prisoners. All along the way, jubilant crowds, happy to be free of the Nazis, greeted the Allied troops as liberators. 4 months after the invasion had begun, the 7th Army joined up with General Patton's 3rd Army in Dijon. The two great armies had joined hands, forming a united front against the German bombing. The air war continued to wear down the Nazi defenses, and in Italy, the U.S. Air Force found a more convenient base from which to launch more attacks. While U.S. ground forces were making their way through France toward Germany, the Air Force was launching attacks from Corsica, Italy.
Ghisonaccia, Corsica, and that's where we flew combat missions from Ghisonaccia all across Italy and up the Brenner Pass and as far north as Innsbruck, Austria, and Dogna, Yugoslavia. We used to drop on railroad bridges, highways, railroad fills, anything that would disrupt the transportation of the German and Italian, the German troops primarily coming to and going from Italy, and supplies. So if we could cut off the Brenner Pass, they could not supply the German Wehrmacht in Italy.
We were a tactical Air Force, the 12th Air Force, and our job was to curtail the enemy supply line, from have the Germans bring down more troops, more ammunition, more supplies to the front lines. So we were bombing bridges and we're in fuel dumps.
In fact, it was the superiority of the Allied Air Force that crippled German defenses. After the Normandy invasion, the Allies had achieved dominance in the air. Scarcely anything moved during daylight hours without being subjected to air attacks. Germany was bombed day and night to disrupt and seriously affect war production. Airstrikes hit at the heart of Germany, dropping 700,000 tons of bombs. The cost of this destruction was incredibly high. 6,000 bombers and about 100,000 aircrew perished. In the end, the Luftwaffe was defeated. With the air war under control, the ground troops pressed onward to Germany. Eisenhower had led a line of troops stretching across the 1,000-mile border between France and Germany. In the middle of this line lay the Ardennes forest. Eisenhower was planning to attack Germany from either the north or the south of the Ardennes. He knew the forest needed to be defended. He assigned just 4 divisions that were either recovering and refitting from earlier battles or were brand new to the war and had little combat experience.
First 18-year-old to be drafted in the service. People never believed that I was going in the Army, that I was being drafted. I looked too young, you know.
The fatigue that we were recovering from being on the line for 70-odd days in Holland, the fact that we had been back at Mormorland for a few days and got a little rest, physically we were ready. Now mentally, I'm not too sure we're ready.
Eisenhower could not have known that Hitler was planning an encore of his 1940 offensive march through the Ardennes. Hitler had his generals amass 24 divisions, 10 of which were tank divisions, to launch a surprise assault through the forest. Hitler hoped that the snowy December weather would continue grounding the Allied Air Force. On December 16th, a thundering artillery barrage started at dawn, catching the Americans off guard.
We got there, I think it was on a Saturday night, and we could hear the German on the other side of the river, and we could hear the tanks and the half-tracks, and there was a lot of snipers there.
We were in this small area in the Ardennes, very heavily snowed in that area. We had 4 to 5 foot snow drifts on one side. There was American Jeeps running up and down that road most of the morning.
There was so much going on, you know, that we couldn't, I don't remember too much. We're here, we're there. I mean, everybody was really on edge. It was quite something.
To be under enemy mortar fire or artillery fire is the most stressful part of combat. With mortar fire, you can only hear it in the last second or two, maybe a whisper of a shell coming in, and then you have the impact. With artillery, you can hear the artillery, the same thing with machine gun fire. The closer it is, the louder the snap as it goes by your ear.
The Nazis blasted through the middle of the limited American defenses. Although outnumbered and outmanned, the Americans defended the key strongholds of Saint-Vith and Bastogne. In the end, Saint-Vith fell to the Germans, but at the cost of precious time and fuel. The U.S. forces in Bastogne were now surrounded by the Germans, but they held on.
But now we were seeing men break down due to metal strain, frostbite. Roughly about 30% of your casualties at Bastogne were frostbite. And that's very painful.
But the 101st continued the defense of Bastogne with dogged determination, while supplies dwindled, ammunition ran low, and morale began to slip.
The Germans are just a few miles from their home territory, so they have plenty of ammunition, and they're shelling the heck out of you. And this is going on and on. So you're not sure how long you'll be around. But while you're able to be, you're going to be there. You're not leaving until it's done.
On December 23rd, the skies cleared enough to drop badly needed supplies and ammunition to the battered U.S. troops.
A man who is in a unit like, we'll say, Company E, they take a lot of pride in that. And they do not want to let their friends down. They want to do their part. And that's beautiful. That bonding, that friendship, the power of that is, you have to see it You have to live with it to appreciate the strength of it. And that's what we had. That's the where we got the strength to go through it again. You're not going to drop out because your friends are there. You're going to stay there. Cold? Well, if he can take it, I can take it. But yeah, it's the bonding of men that keeps it together.
And it was this bonding of brothers in combat that gave the men the strength to continue. After the Allies had pushed the remaining forces out of the Bulge, the next push was toward the Rhine River and Germany just beyond. Until 1945, no army had successfully crossed the Rhine River to invade Germany since Napoleon. As the Allied troops marched steadily toward the Rhine, Hitler kept his troops fighting in front of the river. As the Allies pressed their push closer to the river, Hitler gave the order for his men to cross the Rhine and destroy the bridges behind them. All the bridges were destroyed, except one, and it was over this bridge the U.S. troops marched into Germany, bringing along as much equipment as the fragile bridge could hold. The Allies pressed onward through Germany. Allied bombers targeted Berlin and industrial regions, the Ruhr, Cologne, and Dresden. Dresden was destroyed. As Allied troops moved closer to Berlin, they discovered the means by which the Nazis carried out their final solution: the concentration camps. It was in these concentration camps that the Nazis herded European Jews and others they deemed undesirables. Some camps were work camps, but all the camps had one goal in mind: to erase the Jewish population from Europe. They could be worked to death or cremated. The method didn't matter. The final result did.
We were not prepared for it. We had no inkling that there was anything like this. We had seen displaced persons, but to see a concentration camp like this with people starved to death and in all, in the last stages just before death, this was terrible.
And we went to this building from one end to the other. First, we went to where they took the skins and made lampshades, and there was stuff made out of bones. From there, they took them in where they had this big furnace in front. They were all piled up there. In fact, there was still a burned body in the furnace when they pulled that thing out. Outside was ashes, pile of ashes. And on the other side was the pile of bodies, all their clothes taken off, and young, old, and skinny. All that was left was bones. These were to be burned. People from that village, they marched in to show them the place, you know. Show them all the bodies piled up, and unbelievable that a human being could do that.
You can't imagine, you cannot imagine anything like it, let alone trying to describe it. It's inhumanity, indescribable. This was terrible. And it leaves, anybody who saw it, it leaves a memory that you never forget. Yeah, that's the Holocaust.
All through my ordeals in the war, I don't think there's one day I didn't pray. I thank God that I was there. that my folks and my relatives would see what we were seeing. I thank God that I was there. I was ready to die if I could save the people back home.